Well, I am thrilled to see so many of you joining us today. I think the fact that we have such a great turnout is an emphasis of the fact that many of us as fundraising staff feel overworked. And, you're not alone, like in this community. I'm sure many of you have that feeling. And so we're excited to have you with us today as we walk through our solution to growing your fundraising without having to work so much overtime. So let's hop into the first slide. Drum roll, because I'm going to tell you the secret in slide 1. Y'all, the solution is volunteers. So end of conversation. Everybody have a great weekend. Just kidding. Let us explain a little bit, right? Let's unpack this. Volunteers. What is the problem? The problem is that most charities have only one, if one, full-time fundraising staff member. Show of hands, how many of you are a one-stop shop in the fundraising world in your organization? I think that there are at least a handful of you that you are the only paid staff person. And I'd be willing to venture that if some of you probably wear more hats than just fundraising as well. So you might not even be one full-time, right? And if you have two of you, it could be two part-times. Like oftentimes, if we're lucky, we have one full-time staff member in a charitable organization in our nonprofits. So if you have more than that, consider yourselves lucky. But let's move to number 2. Charities with a bigger team have overly scaled expectations, right? Meaning a staff of 2 is assumed to be able to raise twice as much as one with the same donor base. Right? So if you're lucky enough to have 2, you probably have at least twice the size of a goal with the same base of potential, right? So your job has just become infinitely more challenging. So newsflash, it's not necessarily better that you have a team of 2, is it? But so, what do we do with this? So there's always more than our work week in work to do, right? There's always more than those 40 hours of work that we could be working to bring philanthropic revenue. I think that's one of the biggest challenges in fundraising is that it's never ending. There's no limit to the number of people that exist out there that you could be talking to. Despite people trying to say, we have talked to every single person that we know or that could exist as a donor, and we're just at a dead standstill. How many people have felt that way or thought that before? Newsflash, we could work around the clock every single day of the week, and there would still be more potential. There are enough people on this planet. You have a cause, regardless of your service area. There's still a connection that we could expand out to continue to grow. And so, we know that our work is never done. So I think if those of you who joined us on our boundaries call, that's important to be able to effectively optimize and maximize what we're doing as well, right? So we're either, number 1, going to work overtime, right? Who thinks that's the best solution? Just work around the clock all day, every day, and we're going to be able to be just fine. Nope, because that leads us back to our original problem of being overworked, right? We've got to have balance so we can maintain our momentum, our enthusiasm, our pushing forward. We've got to find that balance in a way that we're effective, efficient, and impactful, right? In maximizing our fundraising for our organization in a healthy way. Okay, what's the next option? Let certain tasks go uncompleted. Let's sacrifice income. Should we sacrifice time? Should we sacrifice income? Doesn't sound like the best idea. Sometimes we do have to prioritize and let things go, right? But there is a better option, and that is to delegate the important stuff to some philanthropy volunteers. So if you do not already have volunteers working on your philanthropy efforts, and I don't mean volunteers, I'm sure many of you have volunteers who are doing other tasks. And to Jim's point, many people do like that hands-on. I want to go in, if this is a hospital, I want to, walk the halls and talk to people, or I want to sit at the front desk, or if it's a hospice, I want to, connect with the families. And if it's a school, I want to, help and engage in that process. And those are all great volunteers. However, we also need philanthropy volunteers, those individuals who say, yes, I'm not scared of fundraising as a 4-letter word, right? I'm not scared of it. It is a powerful thing. And I know that I can have a role. That doesn't necessarily mean I have to be the one to make the ask. We know how to talk to people and get them engaged, to be a part of the fundraising process. So let's talk a little bit about what are fundraising volunteers. Now that we've established there's volunteers that are doing some other, operational sorts of work for your teams, right, for your organizations. But what are the fundraising volunteers there for? First, we look, these are separate individuals and committees. They're not part of the operational side. They're often separate from your foundation board, because many of you have sort of a operational board for the parent entity organization. Some of you are a foundation or a philanthropy support of that, and even have that foundation board. But guess what? Oftentimes when we peel back those layers, we recognize that the foundation board is actually not really helping us fundraise all that much either. They still have, governing, nominating, finance, all these other roles that they're set up for. And so we find that we need more. So oftentimes these individuals are, in addition to a board, a fundraising board that we need to build out specifically for tasks relating to the fundraising process. So don't have a heart attack if this is the first time you've heard us talk about volunteer fundraising. But we're looking at 30 to 50 individuals to do it well, each giving 3 to 5 hours a month of their time, including meetings, right? Think about how much, I didn't do the math, but 30 to 50 times 3 to 5 hours times 12 months, that's a whole lot of additional hours working on your behalf that you can get impactful, effective maximization of fundraising income for your organization. Instead of thinking, oh my gosh, I can't possibly manage 30 to 50 more people, let's think, what can I do with these 30 to 50 more people that I might be just banging my head up against the wall for, right? So next, let's see, who are these people, right? You all have them, kind of, again, back to Jim's point on the, people wanting to give their head, heart, and hands. I wrote down, I like that, right? People oftentimes, especially women in his comments, people don't just necessarily want to write a check, right? So you may have those donors who you're just like, gosh, they're constantly singing our praises. They're really talking about their own personal why. Ding, 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 ding. Those are good people to get to be a volunteer for you, because they're kind of doing what you would be asking them to do anyway. And if you officially get them on as a volunteer, you can sort of help direct them in the way that they can help you in the best way possible. And that's going to be meaningful for them. So look at your donors first and foremost, community leaders, and those people just who have an affinity for your mission. If someone has expressed an interest in your organization, you sure better be looking for a way to get them involved that's going to help make things meaningful for them, and that's going to be impactful for your cause. Okay, and then we organize them, right? We don't just say, hey, let's get 30 to 50 people and go forth. There's a process. We need to organize them into different committees. And the way that we do that with Pride is 4 to 7 committees or teams, each responsible for different gift sizes and types. Okay, sort of like a diversified portfolio. We don't want to say, okay, all 50 people go forth and just help connect us to the world. That's great. But if we can diversify them into their networks, the gift ranges, and all of those things, and deploy them effectively, It's a beautiful thing when we're firing on all cylinders and everyone's organized into teams, and we now have 30 to 50 new people out there who understand their role, how they can help, and they don't have to do all that much extra work, right? If you have 30 to 50 people helping you with 2 additional things, you just have like 100 things taken off your plate. Boom, like that, right? So these teams, usually we look at 6 to 15 people on each of the teams, depending on their purpose, depending on the gift levels, the size of your community, the size of your organization, all those things come into play. But when you can get teams made up of these people, you quickly get to that 30 to 50 people who can help move the needle for you. So we like to often refer to these volunteers, these philanthropy volunteers, as a philanthropy council, and the volunteer structure that helps achieve that financial campaign goal, right? These are the people who help you say, yes, we can do this. Many hands make light work. I want to be a part of this. I'm willing to do this, and go forth and help achieve that campaign goal. So if I haven't scared you yet, and you're thinking about, wow, that's a lot of people, how can we find and recruit these people? I'm going to hand it over to Jared to give you some insights.
Thank you, Marty. So now that we have identified the problem, as well as what fundraising volunteers are and to what capacity they serve, you might think, like Marty said, that that is a lot of people. And how do we even find, let alone successfully recruit these people so that they will want to be involved in that fundraising capacity? And you might think, man, I don't even know 30 to 50 people, and that's totally okay. Start with an overall chair. So you want to essentially recruit top down whenever you're recruiting your fundraising volunteers, starting with the person who is going to be the overall chair. This should be someone who is visible in the community, well respected, ideally is giving themselves at a substantial level. One, just to set the example, but two, they need to have skin in the game. They can't very well ask others to join me if they themselves are not giving. So start with just the one person at the top. Let's move to the second bullet. Okay, well, so once you have your overall chair bought in, then you recruit your committee chairs for each of those 4 to 7 groups that Marty mentioned, depending on how many committees your organization forms. So starting first with your leadership, it's far easier to recruit volunteer leadership first because it takes a lot of the recruitment work off of your plate, but also allows you to leverage the connections of people on your teams to get access to more people. Once you have the committee chairs recruited, you can work with them and your overall chair on recruiting the rest of each of your committees. Because when you have these 5 to 8 influential people in your corner working on your behalf, speaking to the mission for you, it's far, far easier to get the rest of the committee members recruited. Now, some committee members will naturally have more people than others, and that's perfectly fine. It will depend a little bit on what the purpose of the committee is and what level they are able to give at financially and what time commitment they are able to give to you and your organization. Next bullet. So now you may ask, I've got all these people recruited, they're ready to rumble, they want to get started. Do I just send them on their way? No, believe it or not, the vast majority of people that you have recruited are not going to have had extensive training on how to fundraise, how to make the ask, how to properly pipeline donors, and how to churn prospects correctly. A lot of development staff have not even had training on how to do that, let alone volunteers who all probably have different professions. They still want to help though. So we want to make sure we channel that enthusiasm as productively as possible. You want to conduct in-person orientations and training so that they are adequately prepared and confident that they can go out and drive revenue. If you show up to that committee orientation and say, all right, everyone, get out there, go ask for money, bring it home, ready, break, they will be overwhelmed. They will not have confidence in what they're doing. They're either going to wash out or they are not going to just not do much. So we want to conduct these trainings systematically to not only get them excited, thinking, man, I am so glad I showed up to this. I feel really good about what we're doing, but also have had enough training so that they are confident that they can actually go get it done. So they know what their role is, they know exactly what to do and how to do it, and most importantly, they're excited about it. So, and if you have no idea on how to run an orientation like that, feel free to reach out to us. We'd be happy to help. Probably at this point has done hundreds, probably if not thousands of these volunteer trainings and these orientations. So, we're pretty good at it. Next bullet. Now, the process of recruitment for your volunteers can take a little bit of time, on average about 3 to 6 months. This is not going to happen overnight. You want to be methodical in who you recruit and how you recruit them, but you also want to be deliberate in how we do it and not waste the time. With our clients who are first building out their committees, we build in time for this, knowing full well it can take some time for the recruitment process to be done correctly. There will likely be delays and roadblocks. People get sick, people get called for jury duty. There are things that happen that are out of our control, and that's totally okay. Just knowing that it will take some time to be able to build out these committee structures is the right mindset to have. Next slide, please. So who do we ask to join? Now, there is not exactly a boilerplate answer to this, but here are some examples of the typical people that will get involved as a fundraising volunteer. The first one is going to be board members, the people who are already involved in the organization and would like to see it succeed. Board members can be great on fundraising committees, but the one thing with this is you want to make sure that they understand that their role and time commitment for this is in addition to their time commitment as a board member. So it would be 3 to 5 hours that Marty mentioned a month on top of their board responsibilities. So you might lose a couple people because of this. Don't sweat it. It's always better to be upfront about the time commitment with your board members. Next one is former board members. This is an easy way to get people who have served on your board at one point or another and bring them back into the fold. And it's a bonus because they can already speak to the mission from their past experiences. Donors, this is a huge one and an obvious one. The people who are already contributing to the mission, who can approach people in the way of, I'm already supporting this and I would love it if you consider joining me at the same level. Prospective donors. This is a wonderful excuse to reach out to prospective donors that might not have contributed yet. Getting them involved in this capacity can be a wonderful way to secure their gift and have them be an ambassador for your mission as well. Retired employees, again, same thing as former board members. A lot of times, even if they're retired, if they're passionate about the organization, then they will still want to be involved. And this is a great way for them to help and still feel included. Grateful clients / family members. Now, we actually have a whole academy about this in April, about how to best handle this group to make sure that we're getting those thankful patrons of our service in the mission in a transparent and ethical way. Organization volunteers, Marty mentioned that as well. People who are already working in a volunteer capacity to help, usually a pretty easy ask. And then event attendees, just making sure that you are collecting, and retaining contact information if you do have events. Now, these people can be great to get involved as they are likely already supporting you to some degree. And of course, anyone else that your chairs recommend or want to work with. We recruited our chairs for a reason and want to trust them and who they think should be involved in a volunteer fundraising capacity. If they say, hey, you don't know this person, but we got to get John. John Smith. He's the guy to get involved in this mission. He has a personal connection. I'm going to go. You say, great. I brought you onto this role for a reason. I trust your judgment. So make sure that you listen to your chairs, your overall chairs, and all your committee chairs as far as who they think should be involved in whatever you're trying to do. So I'll now turn it over to Shauna to walk us through what to do if you have exhausted all of these people and all of these lists and still don't have enough candidates.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Jared. So still don't have enough strong candidates. When would this be applicable? Well, so you went through all those, that fantastic list that Jared just did, but maybe you're new, right? Maybe you're new to the organization. Maybe you're new to the area, and starting with all those pieces, you're starting from ground zero. You don't have those relationships. Maybe this is a new program that you're starting. So maybe it's not even that you don't have enough strong candidates. Maybe it's that you don't know how to find those candidates, even where to start with the chair, right? So I've been in those shoes. I have walked that walk, and that is where the Pride team is just so fantastic in this very first point that we're going to talk through is trying a feasibility study or a smaller opportunity assessment. When I was in your shoes, if that's you, I was like, oh, my Lance, I need somebody to come in here and to kind of cultivate and dig up this soil and figure out who these people are. I need an excuse to be able to talk to these people and to be able to pick their brains, right? So a feasibility study or a smaller opportunity assessment, you don't have to go all the way. You can do something that's smaller. That really helps you not only identify your campaign potential and your lead gifts, but it really helps you to identify volunteer candidates. You'll have people who will say, I love this organization. I want to be involved. You have no idea who they are. Or they might say, I know of this person who had an excellent experience. And that could be your campaign chair down the road. Those interviews are so impactful for you as a staff person to make your life easier. And they're done by a third party. You have a team that does it. And so the information is just free flowing and you can just identify so many people in those. It also is going to help you to pick a specific project or a campaign, which then allows for you to have a time specific goal and a clear outcome. Volunteers, they value their time and they value knowing that you value their time. So if they know that they're working towards something that is time specific, and results in a clear outcome, then they feel engaged. They feel empowered. They feel like this is something that they maybe want to assign their name to. Okay. So those are really strong benefits of what comes from a feasibility study or an opportunity assessment. And then also I want you to keep in mind, these volunteers that you're working so hard to secure, where you might be sitting back thinking, holy moly, Pride, we're talking about how we're overworked and now we've got all this additional work that we're doing. This is one of those, you're planting a seed for someone to sit in the shade of the tree at a later time things. You're doing extra work now to make your life so much easier. And what we love to see is we have volunteers who have been with organizations for 40 years, 40 plus years. The volunteers are the sustainability. No matter what happens with the staff, no matter what happens with the leadership, those volunteers who are committed to that mission, they can be there for decades. So even though we tell them when we're sitting down with them, we need you to be here for this 3-year project or whatever it is, usually at the end of that 3-year project, if we've done our jobs well, they're like, oh no, I'm going to stick around. I'm going to keep helping them and keep giving money, right? So that's a great tool to use if you are thinking to yourself, okay, thanks, Jared, you gave me all these different buckets to choose from, but I don't even know how to start getting there. Do a feasibility study and start running that way. Okay. Next slide, please. We want to highlight some keys to success. We've talked about a lot of stuff here, right? But what can we hyper focus in on to make sure that we do this and do it well, so that it is our end goal is that we are being helped to take weight off of our shoulders by the power of volunteers. We want to find the best candidates, not the fastest candidates. Same thing when we're hiring in a position, right? We want to find the right person for that role, not just the person who applies right out of the gate. Same thing with volunteers. Volunteers can backfire on you if you don't vet them properly, and then they end up being more work than they are worth. So just put in the time and effort. We can help you with that to make sure that you know how to properly vet a candidate, making sure that you are looking for all the right pieces, okay? Another huge one is to secure their cash gift as a part of that recruitment process. An excellent way to vet your volunteer is to ask them to give their gift as they are coming on as a volunteer. If they say, no, I'm not going to give financially, I would say that's probably your biggest red flag, stop sign, slam on the brakes that you have to know that they are probably not going to be engaged as a volunteer. It is not to say that they don't have a role with your organization, but they do not have a role within the fundraising arm of the organization, okay? So in order for us to be part of the fundraising efforts, we need to fundraise. We tell that to people all the time. This is the foundation, this is the fund development department. We are in the business of raising money. We can make no bones about it, okay? So if you're joining us, this is what we're doing. It doesn't mean you have to ask for money, but it does mean you have to give money. And hopefully you want to give money, right? Also, when you're doing this, make sure that you are not focused on one specific area of your community or one specific area of your business community, okay? You want to have say-so, you want to have volunteers, you want to have a great population from all around your community or your region or whoever it is that you serve. You want to have people that are in this part of the business sector, but you also want to have maybe education. You want to have a broad range of voices, okay? Otherwise, people think that there are the experts in their field, but then you have 4 other experts that are in their exact field. We want for people to feel like they are bringing something to the table, and that variety of members, depending on it, whether it's their day job, their retired job, or what they do as a volunteer, it's really important. So and that also is a place if you're stuck, right? If you're stuck and you can't think of any more volunteers, think about what sectors you're maybe not reaching into. You want to set clear expectations for what their job is and what your job is, right? We love to train this. We love to teach people this, that you are encouraging your volunteers, bringing them on board. Love to say to them, my job is to make your job as a volunteer as easy as possible. That keeps them engaged. And what does that do for me as a staff person? It makes my job easier, right? If I have dynamite volunteers who are out there doing amazing work, asking for money and opening doors to their network, that makes my life easier. So what am I going to do? You better believe I'm going to make their life easier. I'm going to make sure they know where they're supposed to be. I'm going to make sure that they have follow-up. I'm going to make sure that they feel trained. I'm going to make sure that they feel informed. My job is to inform them, to train them, to keep them going in the same direction, to make sure they're never caught off guard. Their job is to bring their network to the table and their skill sets to the table and their financial support to the table, right? So for example, they might say, you know what, I have no interest in filing papers or doing anything of that sort. Well, you're absolutely not going to be doing that. I can promise you that. We will find a role that you serve best in, and we will help you to fly within that role. And then we want to make sure that investing in this effort, okay, I just really want to just drive this home. If you invest in this effort, if you bring along volunteers alongside you, they will make not only your philanthropic efforts incredibly fruitful, they will make your life so much easier and in your role. Think of them, and we say this over and over again, think of your volunteers as unpaid FTEs. They can be more successful at fundraising than you are even. But guess what? They're fundraising towards the same goal that you are. It's not a competition in that sense. It is you unleashing the power of philanthropy through your volunteers. And that makes your life easier. It makes you able to stand up in front of leadership and say, hey, listen, that goal you gave us, we knocked it out of the water. And it was because of this phenomenal team that we have alongside us. So yes, what we're telling you feels like way more work right now, but it is in order to help you have way less work down the road, okay? So if it all seems like too much, you're like, holy moly, I hear you, but it still feels like a little too much, start small. Take your time. You can build up that team. Really, just really think about who would be dynamite to be helping you in this space. And if you already have volunteers, you're already in this space, think about who you could be adding to your team. And I tell you what, if you are still in this space of, holy moly, this sounds like a great concept, I want to know more, just ask us for help. This is something that we love to do. We've all done it. We've all done it 100 times. Bringing volunteers to organizations, training them, providing orientation for them, getting them into a space where they are essentially unpaid staff and they are loving being a part of it. This is what we do best, and we would love to help you with that space, because that's when we see philanthropy programs thrive, is whenever they have engaged staff that doesn't feel like they cannot even figure out where to start their days, because they know where to start their days by checking in with their volunteers who are doing great work and helping them to reach their goals, right? So at this time, love to open up the floor to any questions that you might have anything that we can do as the Pride team to help you feel like you have a next step or anything that you've learned along the way. Don't be shy. Should we in the future like get some Jeopardy music to play here? Okay.
I'll start with a
Someone
question
said-
real quick. So there are some things that we've talked about, like at least in our fundraising elements, about starting new initiatives, or we're creating a new opportunity to open a clinic. That's what and so it's, talking about like what kind of funders would like to participate in that kind of thing. And so looking at, okay, should we, where do we first find that? Do we start an advisory board, for that, or where do we, put together then a volunteer kind of committee to start, doing that type of feasibility? Because I asked about that. So have we done obviously we know that there's the need for that, but like a case study, putting those kind of things together to really help us sell, because as much as we know that we need access to healthcare, especially in the areas that we work with, the homeless, we're not the subject matter experts, and so we need some of those people to come on board to help us kind of navigate that. Now, granted, yes, that's a question we would probably ask the board. I'm still very new to the organization, but it's definitely something that I see that's such a huge need that, yes, we're going to ask the board for sure, but how other ways can we do this that's not going to cost us money? Because we have to fulfill so many years before we can get subsidized. So that's the big kicker too. We're trying to do this, we're trying to do less with more. Try to do more, sorry, other way around. Do more with less. Sorry.
Yeah, and you are fighting a battle that I think all of us feel that we're that we're fighting there. And, I would encourage you in that space to really focus on just like the same idea with the volunteers. We're putting in time now to make it easier in the future. Mm-hmm. What I would encourage you to do is see if there is an opportunity for you to be able to do something like an opportunity assessment or a feasibility study, because that is where the transformational dollars come. You have access to those people to be able to tell you the answers to everything you just said that you oftentimes already know the answers to. Then they're engaged. Then they're telling you whether or not they want to be involved, and they're telling you that they're going to give and they're going to give big. It gives you a platform to reach all of those people who you want to be involved through an interview. So it's kind of a sneaky way on your part of getting them engaged and getting them involved, but then also getting all that feedback to then present to your board of, this is what we recommend moving forward with. And you fundraise through the feasibility study opportunity, like you will gain money and access through that process. So in terms of spending money to make money, that's what I would recommend you try to do. And I know a lot of us are in seats where we are in budget freezes or something like that, and it's very difficult to do. But if we have big dollars that we need to raise, we've got to be able to spend some money to be able to raise it. We can't just, shoot in the dark and hope for the best. Right. So otherwise, sit down with your board members, and, one-on-ones is a good idea to get their input as to what relationships you need to be building. That's my take.
Yeah. I know the concept of spending to make. I get that. I know that that's always something, but yeah, being on a hiring freeze, and, I think everyone is just conscious since now, just kind of doing the hangover of COVID funding that we're not getting, that was coming before. So that's big. It's been a big thing. And I think leaning on our volunteers is going to be a huge contributor to this. I think it's untapped. Thank you.
Anyone have any additional questions? Is there a capacity building grant available?
Yeah, I'd like to know that too.
I feel like I have actually had organizations talk about that. Patty or Jim, have you dealt with one of those in the past? Sorry.
Occasionally will get that. It tends to be an isolated gift, and it's not always a foundation grant. Sometimes it is. It's difficult for some donors to justify, investing in the organization to add more people. Usually they want to look at the mission itself and direct impact that way. So it's difficult, but sometimes you can find an individual, occasionally a foundation that will do that. But it certainly is a challenge to make that happen. And it's usually relatively short term, might be for a year or two, say we'll fund a position for a period of time, get this up and rolling, and to add capacity, in other words, be able to add results. But it tends to be short term rather than long term, unlike where you might get a chair endowed at a university or a college. We don't see that as much as far as the capacity as far as our staff's concerned.
Just, and to add to that, yes, it is generally an individual more so than a grant that has done that. But if you can say within the next 2 years, this person, by building this organization, by adding an FTE, by adding more staff, we will generate X amount more. We are confident that after 2 years that we can do this on our own. That is when we have seen that be successful. We've done that in the area of grateful constituent programs, grateful family, grateful patient, grateful constituent programs, to get someone who has seen that and said, yeah, I'll take a chance on that and do that. We've seen nursing, we've seen some others specific positions, but as far as overall, people sometimes are a little reluctant to do that. And the grant makers, we're finding that's tougher than it was, 5, 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago when we were seeing a lot more of that. So good question, Karen.
Well, so my question really was more for the person who asked the question, because opposite to what you're seeing in my area, and I'm in the Pittsburgh area, we are seeing more foundations do capacity building grants to help you look at the organization overall, not to fund a position. So they might fund someone like Pride Philanthropy to be the consultant to help the organization build its capacity to talk about just these things. And so it was a question for not knowing the specific area, and I'm sorry, I missed her name, that we're talking about. Megan, thank you. It was a question for her. Is there somebody that would fund the ability to have someone come in and help them? And at least in this area, they call those capacity building grants.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Karen, that's so interesting. Whenever you put that up and I saw CASA next to your name, I thought that you were talking specifically about capacity building grants for CASA, because our local CASA here has, we have 2 positions who are funded here through grants for CASA. So that's an interesting, good connection there.
Nice.
Yeah. It's good to think that, that's something you don't think about asking, for funding too, as well, from a grant funder, so, but yeah, definitely I know there'll probably be individuals that would be interested in doing something like that. But even trying to find, because even the questions about like, well, if they won't give money, can they give their time? So looking at in kind, finding those people who are really excited about what we're doing, but sure, I'll give you an hour or 2 of my time, talk through things like that. So subject SMEs, that's what I want to find.
Yes. No, great dialogue. Thank you, ladies. Thank you both. Karen, thank you for bringing that up, because I have, just to kind of close that conversation out, I've definitely had people come and say, hey, we need to do a feasibility study. This is important enough. I'll fund it. Like I've seen that come from volunteers who are like, we know we can't go forward without this. We understand the organization is in some sort of a freeze, but if I designate my gift to that, so yes, I'm sure there are grants available, but to kind of Patty's point on the individuals as well, in that vein, sometimes you do have a very, invested board member who's like, we need the roadmap to go forward. We need the help with this. So that's definitely a very, very good way to look at things if you're in a situation like that. So again, thank you, Megan. Thank you, Karen. Both appreciate your questions and comments. Anything else for the good of the order before we review what's next in our upcoming sessions? Okay, well, again, thank you all for joining us today. If you're not